Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, we are welcoming you. As you know, approaching the new normal has been having a lot of sessions of late. This is the fourth session, and we have Pooja with us. Pooja is going to speak on the topic transition to remote learning and its impact. Now, let me give you a brief idea about what Pooja does. Pooja is an author, columnist, poet, bilingual blogger, also a professional translator and consultant for online and social media content. She is also a gender and mental health expert. Pooja has scores of international publications to her name. Her blogs have been awarded multiple times at the Orange Flower Awards. Also, you can see a lot of Pooja's articles all across in Women's Web, in a lot of newspapers. I personally have read a lot about Pooja, and I have been a regular viewer of her online discussions on mental health. Over to you, Pooja.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for such a special introduction, and I'm glad to be here speaking about two things that are very close to my heart. One is of course mental health and the psychosocial arena, and the other is of course education, because I'm a parent myself and I have been an educator. So we have been in this new normal for a while now, right? So, and in this new normal has redefined a lot of things. So I will begin with defining and redefining a few things. Pallavi, will you please allow me to share my screen so that I can do my presentation as well? Okay. I still can't. Somebody will have to, the host will have to allow. Okay, thank you. All right. So, yeah. So, can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can see.
All right. So I will be beginning on this. This is where how I will define uh, the core area of this discussion today. Now, those of you who've been, linked with education and have been into academics know this. You are not new to this definition of digital education, where we're using technology enhanced learning as we are doing right now to impart education or even do examinations or whatever. But there is a thin line. There's a difference here. This is not new. This was part and component and parcel of education. This has been part of our education system for a while now, all right? Now, what has changed in this pandemic world is the fact that we have tried to shift our entire education system into this world. That is what has changed. Earlier, children were doing a project or two online, or they were doing some kind of a research online, or making a PPT for something online. But now the entire classroom experience, the peer experience, the learner instructor experience, examinations, tests, evaluations, all of that has become an online thing. So I think that is where that is the kind, when I say digital education here, I'll be referring to this digital education where the entire system is being run online. Now, digital education in itself in India, in the context of India specifically, has certain limitations. Some of the limitations are universal, but specific to India, there are some limitations. One is, of course, universal, which you might have found references in Canada, in France, in a lot of other places, that they realize that this kind of learning is not very conducive for all age groups. For instance, if there are play groups or even pre-primary children, very young children, it is not very conducive to have online, education for them, or online classes for them, say, 3 hours every day, 4 hours every day. So age group is one major factor, because most of the student learners are also from the younger age group. Then another issue that is also universal, but specifically in India, is accessibility to digital education. Now, this can again be in various layers. One is the accessibility as in terms of logistics. that how many of our people have access to internet or access to devices or access to a good stable connection and all of that. And then there is accessibility in terms of the diversity of our population, the difference between urban and rural populations, and how they adapt to digital learning. Also geography. And in India, one specific barrier is like now we are speaking in English. Most of the webinars I have done have been in English. Maximum they have been bilingual, Hindi, English. A few I've done in Punjabi. But other than that, I don't see a lot of digital education happening in regional languages. So that can also be a barrier. Then in India, again, one specific barrier that we have found over our, some little research that has been there is about gender and class. In India, we found that women students, girls, do not have access, as much digital access as boys and men, which is a very peculiar scenario in India. They do not either have access to the gadget or to the internet, or their being on screens is also a cultural barrier. So that is also a problem. And of course, class, because it also defines, the whole economy of learning. Now, when we speak about mental health, there are three groups which are directly influenced by it. One is, of course, the student and learners who are also the recipients of this digital education. And then there are the educators and content creators, like all of us here, who are trying to impart or who are trying to create content that is conducive to be shared via a screen or via an internet medium. And then there are families. We must also understand that this digital education is not happening in an island. It is not happening just on a screen. The screen is in a room or in a hut or in a backyard or in a front yard or in a house or in a remote village or in a small town or in a, so families and societies around it also have a huge impact on how digital learning is imparted and its role in the whole mental health scenario. Now, this screen, I would like all of you to read once and just read and just give it a thought, because these are, some issues that were found. And I will say here that as of now, the research around mental health and this kind of digital education, where the entire spectrum of education has been shifted to online education, there has been very little research, but still these are a few trends, you can say, or a few new scenarios that we found that are relevant. So one is, decrease in student empathy. Of course, when, when a student interacts with the screen and when a student interacts with a live teacher, it is a very different interaction. Then there is lack of physical activity. I do not like seeing my child sitting in front of the screen for 4 hours, but she does it every day. So physical activity, and that also impacts mental health. Screen fatigue, a lot of schools have now started reducing hours because children are facing, they have eyesight issues or other issues. Then, of course, there is cyber safety issues. Anxiety, screens induce a lot of anxiety in children a lot of times, especially videos often, video appearances are not very comfortable for a lot of people. Then there is a reduction of metacognitive skills and concentration. Metacognitive skills are basically skills where we work on ourselves, where, for instance, self-assessing, self-correcting. So those skills are changed when you're doing them on a screen. And then there is, the stress when there is less access. For instance, a few months ago, we had a spate of incidents where children were under a lot of stress because they did not have access to classes. And we even witnessed a few cases of self-harm because of it. So all these issues are very, very relevant. And then there are some stats which are easily available, but I have just put them here. That they just show that access is the major issue. Access is one issue which is causing one major, stress area for most children in India. Now, I don't know how many of you follow news regarding education. Just yesterday, Delhi University had its mock tests. online, and their site crashed, and a lot of people could not upload things, and a lot of people could not download things, a lot of people could not log in. Now, Delhi University is supposedly one of the better universities in the country, with one of the better facilities, with a good IT support and everything else. So, and the students were also mainly, they were most of them were undergraduates, so they were adults. I would presume between 18 to 21. So that age group is usually tech friendly and all of that. But still, they encountered a host of issues in the mock test, and we realized that how this digital education medium is not conducive maybe to our Indian conditions as of now. In India, therefore, the challenges of e-learning are very, very specific and very, very nuanced. And that's why their correlation with mental health is also very nuanced. One is in India, our students and teacher relationship. Like today, it's Guru Purnimas. I've been reading a lot about teachers since morning and what kind of teachers do we have in India. And the irony is that we have very few human teachers, I would say, very real and human teachers. They're either idealized into, being worshipped, or they are the other extreme where students are absolutely scared of them, and there are all kinds of fears and punishments and traumas related to teachers. And I think the same thing gets reflected in a lot of our online education as well. Of late, a lot of my friends who are child psychiatrists or adolescent psychiatrists, and they've been dealing with families specifically and children specifically, have realized that for digital education, anything that we decide or anything that needs to be done has to be three-pronged. There has to be these three people directly involved, have to be integrated into that planning process. So digital education then impacts the mental health of not just the learner, but the teacher as well, and the family and the people related. Uh, a day before yesterday or something, a grandparent was telling me that a play group, he has a grandchild, and the play group has started an online class. So they do not want that young child to use so much screen, but the school wants the child to use the screen. So is it good for the child or not? Now, in usual circumstances, if there was no pandemic and the child was going to school and would be able to cycle out for 1 hour and play in the park with his friends, I would have said, no, screen is not required for a 4-year-old. Why does he need a screen? But in these circumstances, my advice to him changed. I told him, okay, it is all right. The child has been inside the house for 3 months, has not been able to go out much or play out much. It will do a little good to the child, maybe if he sees his friends on screen, or maybe sees his teacher, or maybe sees some kind of a semblance of a classroom, or they do some activity together. So this new normal then has redefined a lot of our principles of what is right mental health wise also, and what is not. Screens usually are related to anxiety. A lot of our sleep disorders come from the blue light from screens, and our usual advice to people who come to us saying that I can't sleep, the first thing is we ask them, how long do you use your phone, or does your phone sleep with you? So that used to be before the new normal. Now I know the screens just sit with us, sleep with us, eat with us, and sometimes go everywhere with us. So the advice that was probably good till 3 months ago or 4 months ago, it does not hold good now. So we need to kind of re-observe and reconstruct and have new dimensions for mental health scenarios in this new digital education scenario as well. Now I'll again come back to my presentation, and I will show you a little bit of what we are doing in terms of how we feel like it is impacting teachers. Uh, teachers, of course, are a very teachers and instructors. Now, this is one of the inputs we received from one learner. Uh, she said, I prefer to be in a classroom. I have to do everything on WhatsApp, submitting assignments, talking to friends, and it is boring. Usually our belief is that WhatsApp is not very boring, right? That it is a very engaging thing. But imagine to do all your education via WhatsApp groups. And in a lot of small towns, that is what they have access to. They do not have access to probably, something like a Microsoft Teams or a Google Meet or Zoom maybe. So they are just sending lessons on WhatsApp groups, and that is where they discuss. And I can imagine how tiring it can be to read 156 messages in one group in 1 hour. So, and the scale, of course, if you see the box, you can see the scale. I mean, it is not just in India, 1.26 billion children are affected. And when I say children here, most of them are not adults, so under 18. So these are, some issues that a lot of students are facing. One is isolation, leading to anxiety and depression. Because peer interaction is very, very crucial in your younger years, in the first 2 decades of your life. So peer interaction is very crucial to education as well. Then sleep deprivation, of course, because so much screen and is leading to sleep deprivation. It becomes a vicious cycle, right? You do not sleep because you are using screen, and because you're using screen, you do not sleep. So it becomes a vicious cycle, and that is leading to further issues with children, especially in memory retention, because subconsciously we feel that सब कुछ है स्क्रीन पे, सब कुछ सेव्ड है, दोबारा जाके देख लेंगे. So memory retention has gone for a toss a lot of times. Also productivity, children are not doing a lot of work as in writing or in terms of doing their own things. And also their actual learning performance is also being affected. And of course, the physical risks of using a screen, as we all know, they are all there. Now, here is this very interesting quote by, this is not his quote, but he used this in his book. George Bernard Shaw said, "He who can does, and he who cannot teaches." Now, you can imagine, what biases we have for teachers in our society. We usually believe that anybody and everybody can become a teacher. And we think that, teaching is probably the easiest thing to do, and those who do not do anything else become a teacher. I've been a teacher myself. I've taught at various levels. So I know it is not easy, and I know that teachers put in a lot of hard work, and whoever in this world has become whatever has become that because of a good teacher. As teachers, educators, what are some of our main mental health related issues? One is, stress, of course. And where does that stress come from? That stress comes from various things. One is teacher-student ratio is dense, as Saurabh was saying. There are 100 windows on your screen, and which is not the scenario in most in-person classes. Maximum you will be 1:40 or 1:35. Here you might have 120 students in one group, and some of them then you do not even know personally, so that induces stress. Then teachers are not just doing classes. We were talking about screen fatigue of the learners. Teachers are doing all the background work for those classes. So they are doing extra screen time. They are making assignments, they are correcting assignments, they are creating content a lot of time. So their screen presence is even more than a student. So that is again an issue, and that is affecting sleep for a lot of educators. Sleep, family time, and a lot of their self-care has gone for a toss. I know a lot of teachers who told me कि पता नहीं चलता कब दिन हुआ रात हुआ क्लास खत्म हुई नहीं हुई, and that is very, very common. Then of course physical health risks from overusing of screens are there. Also, as the first point, when we have students in large numbers, or like I'll give you my daughter's example. She started her class 7 session online this time, because by the time the session started, we already were in a pandemic. Now some of the teachers are new. She's been in the same school since class 1, but some of the teachers she does not know, and the teachers also do not know her. Now, had she been in a physical setting, they would be like 1:30. So they would have some kind of an interaction or introduction or warming up or knowing each other, and would, know each other by their body language or how they speak or what they do. But now, since it was done online, that personal context is missing for both the teacher as well as the student. And that makes teaching, I think, very, very impersonal. You are imparting a lesson, but you are not able to personalize it. Also, that then in turn creates pressure on these teachers or educators to create an engaging online experience. It is very difficult for me or anybody to judge ke 120 students hain, are all of them engaged, are all of them finding this interesting, or they are just not there. So teachers then are going through a lot of stress. And then I come to the third strand here, which is parents and family. Now, in India, we usually, I think till my generation, parents had very little participation in education. Let me be very honest. We did not even have regular PTMs. I studied in Shimla, and my report card came in winters during the snow by post. So my parents didn't even go to the school to even pick my report card. So when the parent was called to school, it means that you've done something. You've created some trouble. That's why the parent is coming to school. Otherwise, parents were usually distant. They would buy books or, just most of the parents. Now, role of the parents has changed. Lot of modern parents themselves also want to be a part of the learning process, which is a very good change. And also schools and colleges, they want some kind of a connection with the parent, whether it is through a union or a group, or parents who are resource people, they come and give lectures or do whatever. They want parents to participate. Now, in an online scenario also, parents have been asked to offer support in the learning structure, or, decide, which courses to opt, or, whatever. Then, in a lot of families, especially where children are, learners are not adults, it's the parents who are facilitating access, usually it is the gadget or the connection is what the parent has to do. Uh, and I was having this discussion, which I have just captured here on this screen, with a friend of mine, Dr. Bhushan Shukla. He's a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and he has witnessed a lot of students and parents coming in because of academic stress. And these were some of the observations he made. He said that both parents are working from home most of the times in urban settings, and then there is not just school online. Tuition class is also online. Hobby class is also online. Playground is also online. So, there is constant online. The whole household becomes a constant online thing. Also, parents, whether they are working or not, they feel overstretched because of this new element introduced in their life. A lot of parents are not so tech skilled like me, so they struggle a lot with their child when a child asks them to install this new software or open this new thing, or so that is also a challenge. And then there is one very psychological impact of it, which is the erosion of parental authority at home. We usually, encourage relationships or interactions where parents and children are interacting openly. But yes, it is important to have some kind of a discipline in a family or in any institution, whether it's a school or it's a family. It has to run according to certain rules and certain norms. Now, when a child is constantly on the screen, it is very difficult for a parent to kind of intervene or use some kind of a discipline. And then there is this whole gamut of interpersonal relationships, whether it is between the teacher student or the teacher parent, or the student and the student's parent. There is this whole gamut of relationships that is being messed up by the screens. And the studies that have happened before COVID have definitely shown that in online settings also, if the teacher's mental health well-being is not optimum, it does affect the quality of the class and how the education or the course is being imparted. Now, some technological issues are also there, which all of you might have also encountered. For instance, if some days your audio is not very good, or you're constantly, there is some background noise to it, or your screen is shaky or whatever, so that will induce irritability, that will reduce concentration. And I have seen a lot of teachers and parents who might be very good educators otherwise, but on a screen it is very difficult to uh, for everybody to interact on a screen. So that whole feeling of community and connectedness that we often achieve through a course or through learning online, that is missing. Also, how safe are our screens? How much time do we have? As we were discussing just before we started, time restraint is also playing a huge role, because constantly there is a rush for the teacher, for the student to reach these deadlines via a screen, which were quite flexible before they were brought into the screen. And this is, I think, the last screen, where is something which I often believe about e-learning. I have been myself a student in e-learning. So I always believe this, that the most important principle for designing or having a lively e-learning is to see e-learning design not as information, but as designing an experience. And that is what I think is the crux of it. So when we are defining digital education as an experience, then we cannot take away the psychosocial component from it. Of course, the psychosocial component is there in any kind of education when it is happening in a physical environment as well. But at that time, the norms by which it is governed are very different. Here we have one new player in it, which is a screen. And when I say the screen, it means the whole gamut of other things. How good you are at tech, how good your logistics are, how good your camera is, how good your voice is, how confident you are on a screen. So those whole new, I would say, can of worms gets opened when a screen is introduced as another new factor or another new dimension to this whole psychosocial arena of education. And last but not the least, I would like to say that, of course, it has a lot of positive things to it. I have found I also work a lot in disability. So a lot of students find it much easier, taking a class online. But nevertheless, the issues that are related to it, whether they are about inducing anxiety or they are about stress that is because of lack of access, or language issues, or sometimes I see students, not having, say, enough space for digital education in their lives. For instance, Delhi University, I can tell you, we were counseling students earlier, and I have friends who teach there. They have a huge number of students coming from a socio-economic strata where they have just one phone in a family, one smartphone in a family. Now, the brother has to do his work from home also from that phone. The sister has to attend her class. There are calls that have to be made. And there is that limited amount of money that can be spent on data. So we are very privileged that we don't have to consider all these factors when we go into a webinar or when we sign up for a new class. But a huge population in India is going through these challenges every day. And then that has led to, in fact, in a lot of scenarios, it has been seen that where they try to have some kind of online tests and education, they see a lot of dropouts. And the irony is that in India, most of them are girls. It is the girl in the family who's expected to sacrifice or drop out, or let it be for a while, and other things are prioritized. Similarly, children in India, of course, urban children have a very different profile, I would say. Some of them have an independent phone or a laptop or a tablet or are tech aware. But children in villages do not have those kind of privileges. So my child has cousins in faraway places in Himachal and in other states. So when she tells them about what she did on her Microsoft Teams or in her Coursera class or whatever, it is French to them. And I feel very bad about it, and they might feel stressed about it. So I had to just tell them and talk to them that it's all right, I mean, it is all right. She is not doing something that you need to feel bad about, and it is all right. You will do your learning your way. So digital education is becoming a new normal. But as an educator and as a mental health practitioner, I believe that it should not be made the only method or the primary method of education. I hope that once the pandemic is over, we keep it as a component in education, definitely, and try, sorry, and try to expand both the reach and see how much time we are spending on screens, what kind of information is available on screens, how much video is all right. Those kind of researches need to be done, but I do not think that it is very conducive to make it the primary model of education. Because as humans, I believe we'll probably take, I'm not a scientist, but I think we'll probably take another 3-4 generations to evolve into those kind of beings who'll be fine doing everything via a gadget. I am still not fine doing everything via a gadget. A cell phone came into my life much later, say last 15, 17, 18 years ago. But so I grew without a screen as a student. Up to my MPhil, I have done everything without a screen. The only time I was doing my research and thesis, and I had to interact with writers in Australia, so I used to write them mails from a cyber cafe in a university. So that was the only intrusion of screens. Now I see students doing screens all the time. And that has, I think, impacted a lot of their interpersonal relationships, their interpersonal skills, like striking a conversation with another human being, like understanding body language if the other person is tense or upset, because their point of reference has now become a screen. I think the point of reference for humans should be humans. And that is where this new normal should not interfere. So I think I have just gone on, and I think all of us, वो लेक्चरर होते हैं तो उनका हिंदी में वर्ड होता है प्रवक्ता, तो उनका काम ही होता है बोलना, है ना, वक्ता होना ही काम होता है. But I think we should make it more of a conversation, and I think I've spoken enough. So I would now would like to discuss, or you can ask me questions, or if there are questions on YouTube, please forward them.
So yeah, you actually presented it with so much of clarity, like getting an understanding of both parents, students, and like different age groups. It was quite an engaging session. I think a lot of us have a lot of questions. Like I personally feel like uh, I don't know. I have got habituated with this online and pandemic thing. Now I need to understand like how will I see this after this pandemic comes to a halt. Like whether I will be able to go back to my normal routine of going to office every day, of not being online, because as you said, it's all, we are always online, like we like everything is online. Like I hardly remember the last time I opened a book. I'm reading everything online, so I know it's affecting my mental health a lot. So I want to ask you, how do you think after the pandemic comes to a halt, how are we going to cope up with it? Like I personally want to ask you that.
Okay, I'll unmute myself. Okay, what I feel personally is that I'll tell you with my reference, because you gave your personal reference. I'll give you my reference. My reference is that I've been working from home across a screen for the last 12 years. So it became my normal. Long back, it became normal for people. But I will tell you this, that the last 3 months or so, 3-4 months, uh, screens have started giving me also fatigue. Imagine somebody who's been working for 11 and a half years on screens. So what changed in these 3 months? What has changed probably is what you said, is that the sense of normalcy from life around me went away. Even though I was working on screens earlier, right? My child was going to school, People are going to offices. I used to go out for meetings. I used to do such presentations and workshops in person. But now all of that has become a screen. So yes, when we are dependent so much on screens, it is going to affect how we think. That is one. You know, how we code information in our brain. That is one part of it, to put it simply. And second is, it is going to affect, as I told you, interpersonal relationships, how you relate to a colleague, how you relate to a boss, how you relate to a commute also. I don't know how many of you have stepped out of the house or taken a drive. I have just gone out twice with a friend, and it was important for my mental health to do it. Uh, but just stepping out physically now has a very different meaning to it than it was earlier. So it is going to impact a lot of our uh, life in as such. But I believe, as we say that, you know, uh, there are some things which we need to wean from. You know, we need to wean from screens, and wean. When I say wean, then of course, as you said, we'll have to have other things. We'll have to bring in other things. For instance, books, as you said. For instance, meeting people in person. For instance, doing certain things in person, right, rather than doing it on the screen just because it is convenient. So this weaning will have to be done for each one of us, because no matter how much our dependence is on screens, and no matter how convenient it makes life for us, I always believe, and as I said also earlier, that for humans the reference has to be humans. Otherwise, it will start affecting not just your mental health, but your physical health, and also your perception of self. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think Saurav
Okay,
and
so
Priyank will be having questions.
yeah, so what I was thinking, like we have talked about how if we go back and how the current situation is having the mental health impact, and how there is increasing inequity basically,
Mm,
when some people have resources and access, people don't have. But
yeah.
I'm just thinking, I don't know, but I'm just thinking that if the pandemic, remains, let's assume that it is not going in near future. It stays with us. Then is there an alternative you see? Like if we don't go for the whole online and thing, or this whole digital thing, then what do we do? Like what what is something else we can do about it? Giving the whole social distancing thing or the pandemic thing which is there.
One very conducive model that a lot of first world countries are doing right now, I know about Finland and Canada, is the fact that, there they have started middle schools and high schools again. All right. And that is where, they have made a whole new way of doing it. For instance, they have uh, 20 students in a class. Of course, population is a huge factor, right? They have 20 students in a class, so they have classes only thrice a week, and they have divided the 20 into 3 groups, and they come alternate day. So the social distancing is maintained. There is peer interaction happening. They are meeting their teacher in person. The teacher is also meeting each student in person. The students are having some feel of their school every day. So even if they do online classes 3 days, fourth day they go to school, and they see school, and they meet teachers, and they go to their actual science lab and not do an experiment on the screen. So one is that model. Another model, I think, in India, of course, our issues are very, very specific. So we do not know how effective those models will be in our kind of population. But I am also equally, you can say, skeptical about the digital education scenario in India. So what are our options? I would ask you, I mean, because both the things don't look very conducive in India. Population wise, that model, and logistics wise, this model. So what do we do? So maybe we'll have to find some kind of a middle path, or some kind of a way by which we, reduce this disparity, and have something maybe age related. Maybe senior students can go to actual educational institutions with social distancing, but for junior students or for younger ones, we can have some kind of a more expansive and inclusive online education. So there has to be, in our kind of country, we cannot have one solution for everybody. That is a given. So we'll have to find a more innovative solution, I believe. Yeah.
Um, I have a question. So, according to the national stats, by 2025, more than 70% of the households in India will have access to smartphones and internet. This is the data that I read. I
Yeah.
don't remember the reference exactly, but I'll share it with you. So,
Okay.
do you think, according to these stats, the transition to digital world will be quicker if people have access to smartphones and internet, and we can see transition happening in next 5 to 10 years because of that?
Well, it is a very good question. You said each family will have a smartphone, right?
Yes,
I
household
think I
household.
also, yeah, one household, right? Now, again, I'll come back to the logistics of it. In India, a household could be anything from 8 members to 2 members to whatever, right? So if 8 members have one smartphone and 5 of them are in the education age group, 5 of them are from the age group of say 8 to 23, and all of them have need to have digital access to some kind of online content or education, and they have just one smartphone. It will not be conducive at all. Plus, it is not just a smartphone that enables us to have access to digital education, as I said in my presentation also. It is internet access, which is not very good in India. It is also the environment around us. A lot of times when I rarely do video calls, but and I don't usually do counseling or my psychological first aid with very young children. I do it usually with young adults and adults. But a lot of times, when you have somebody running behind your back or a lot of street noises behind your back, it becomes just impossible to concentrate or to have that kind of a serious conversation or a classroom experience there. So these kinds of logistics in our kind of demography and setting are probably not very conducive. And we will have to first, probably if we have to start looking at digital education as an option, first aim at making at least educational institutions fully digital in that sense of the word. अभी तो schools में भी या पूरी तरह से all our colleges, all our professional colleges even are not fully digital. So thinking of every household and every family going digital completely is, I don't think, feasible. Even in first world, even in France, they found out that all students don't have gadgets, so they did not have access. Same was the case with Canada. And there, they have been doing digital education for last decade and a half. But for the first time, they realized that there is this disparity. Now, in India kind of setting, I think we have to do a lot of spade work to make education accessible via a screen and online for everybody, and that will require a few decades, I think.
So another question I have here is, so edtech, when it comes to edtech, we're not just confined to classrooms pertaining to Zoom. So we have a lot of content which is self-paced. We have a lot of videos content which learners can learn whenever they have time, whenever they have access.
Yeah.
When we see at that aspect that there are other ways of consuming content and learning material which are self-paced, which are convenient. So how about that? Like, do you think there'll be shift when it comes to considering content being digitalized and not online classrooms taking place, not only online classrooms taking place?
Yeah, that is another big segment in digital education. I have myself been, taking some of these courses online. One of the very good courses is from Yale, which is one of their most popular courses known as the Science of Well-being. Now this course is by the Yale University, and if you see it now as it is running now during the pandemic, Professor Santos does it from her living room. The videos are shot in her living room with 20 students in her living room. But they do it very nicely, and the pace and the assignments and how the assignments are lined, and the research material they have, or the support material they give you, or the reading material they have. The course has been there in Yale in real classrooms for more than a decade now. So all that material comes to them ready-made, comes to them handy. They have a website that is very, very student friendly and is run by a lot of student support groups also. So that model is also successful only if you have a huge support system around it that is very conducive to online learning. I'm sorry to say, but I can say this conclusively about at least higher education in India. Till now, most of our professors and most of our, people, educators, they might be very good in their subjects, no doubts about that. But some of them, I think most of them, are not very friendly with this whole self-paced classrooms, or how to conduct a class differently when you're doing it for that kind of a model where a course is self-paced, or it is being imparted to international students, or it needs to be that diverse in its vocabulary, language, and also references. So those are some of the barriers again. Running such a course that is self-paced, that people can access whenever they want or from wherever they want, and in multiple languages and in multiple cultural contexts, also needs a lot of background work. And in India specific context, I think that will be a next step. Once you fix your basic academic digital learning, only then you can move on to this kind of tertiary learning to be made into more friendly to the learner and as well as to the educator. Yeah.
So, Pooja, I think I've sent you a message as well. But
Yeah, I can see that.
what I wanted
Yeah.
to say was I really enjoyed your presentation. And well, yesterday I was talking about how to use e-learning to further your career at a forum. So I talked about around 60% of what you said. I basically said similar things over there. And my question is that, so most of our edtech, as Jasleen basically said about edtech in India, most of our edtech is about content making and then publishing the content. The experience part of it doesn't
Yeah.
exist,
Yeah.
right? One of the biggest challenges over here, and as you rightly pointed out about our professors as well, is teacher training. So
True.
before we go on to start telling students what to do, we will probably have to tell teachers what to do. And
Absolutely.
seeing the entire situation with schools and colleges in India, where they're firing teachers left and right and not paying them
Yeah.
salaries. How do you expect that we get this done?
Okay. See, one very good thing that I think a lot of you must have read about Renaissance, and what Renaissance did for learning uh, to the world and to Europe particularly, and I think they're still reaping the benefits of Renaissance, is that it democratized education, right? It broke down the hierarchy of the scholars and those who hoarded those manuscripts in Germany, and those who had access to the Goethe press and did not want to have translations of so many things. So I think it needs a renaissance, really. The hierarchies need to be broken, I believe. So we have to understand that a university professor might have all the degrees from all the universities in the world, but a teacher, primary teacher somewhere in Bastar, might be delivering more quality in a lesson than that professor. So that hierarchy needs to be broken down. And one challenge would then also be that how to integrate technology into that lesson in Bastar uh, without, demolishing this knowledge structure that we have in the city. For instance, a university. So how to, build those bridges where there can be an interchanging of skills and technology and maybe even knowledge, because in a diverse, as I said again and again, in a diverse community like India, education cannot exist without the cultural context. So the cultural context has to be figured in. And hence, I think the hierarchy of education as it is right now, that it is flowing from the top, that has to be broken. It has to be democratized. Lessons have to be democratized. And coming back to the earlier question also, the access to education according to the learner has to be there because they are the recipients primarily. But the access to educational material and to shaping of educational material to teachers also has to be there. They have to have freedom in choosing. I'll give one personal example there. I teach disability etiquette in medical colleges in the Delhi University, right? And I do it by poetry. So to put it simply, I was teaching poetry about disability to future doctors so they understand disability with empathy. So they have a proper vocabulary to address when a person with disability comes to them in a medical distress. And I had chosen a few poems for the syllabus. So this board tells me, ma'am, this poem about sexuality is not right. So I told them that the students are going to be doctors in 1 year from now. They are probably going to be addressing sexual health issues, reproductive health issues. So you do not expect them to read about sexuality or sex or sexuality of disabled people. So those kind of barriers of mindset and culture that we have in our education, they need to also break down to bring in some kind of democratization in content, in how the content is delivered and then how the content is received. So it has to work in all those areas. Yeah.
One small follow-up question, if everyone allows me. Sorry. So
Yeah.
you talked about teachers, and then you also talked about parents, right? The impact on parents. So I was just watching an interview of this gentleman from AIPA, which is the All India Parents Association, and he was talking about the fees hike in schools and why the parents don't want to pay that. And he basically suggested that if the management committee of the school is so focused on fees collection from parents to manage the expenses, then the management community should also talk to parents who are basically paying the fees. So they should allow 50% of management committee should be composed or comprised of parents. Do
Parents.
you think these kind of changes are going to happen post COVID or whenever COVID ends in India?
I don't know. I'll again be skeptical about it. Just because some parents are capable of paying fee, paying a certain amount of money, I don't think they are capable enough to interfere in the education process. And I'm saying this with all offense meant to parents, including me. Parents would probably not be the ideal people to have some say in the education process per se all the time. Some of the parents might have some skills to give there or some inputs there, but they might not be the best people to have interference in the curriculum per se, or in how the classes are being done, or what is the structure of the courses or whatever. So participation, I think, as in terms of transparency of how the money they are paid, they are paying is being used in the school or on their wards, is their right to know. That kind of transparency should be there. But I do not advocate that parents should have a say into what the curriculum should be or what the syllabi should be. God forbid, half of our parents would say कि रामायण महाभारत ही पढ़ाओ और कुछ मत पढ़ाओ. So let's not go there. That is again a very problematic territory in India. Yeah.
So there is another question that I had, but I don't know how relevant it is. So I come from a very small railway town in Assam. So my school, what has happened in my school, we had buses as well as we had teachers. We had to pay both, like you have to pay bus fare also, you have to give teachers salary also. So since the last 3-4 months, the buses are not on service. So the parents in that railway town, they are mostly either working in railways or they are people, those who have shops and all, so which are closed because of the pandemic. So now what is happening? It seems the school authorities has told the parents to pay the fee, school fees, which is because the teachers are taking online classes. Also, the school authorities are telling to pay the bus fare. So right now, a lot of parents were messaging me and asking me how, like, it is not possible for them because there are some parents, those who are working in railways, so they definitely get salaries because they're in government service.
Salary, yeah.
What about parents who are not getting anything, like those who are not earning anything? How is it possible for them to even pay the bus fees? So it seems the principal and the teachers were telling the parents that you have to understand that the bus was in service throughout all these years, and right now if the bus is not in service, then I don't know, they say that the bus, like something will happen in the so-called bus ka pura jo thing hai and all that. So they were asking me, the parents were requesting me, like what do they should do, like as parents, because if they don't have money, how are they supposed to cope up with this situation? And this does, they are not aware till how long this would continue. So I wanted to ask you as a parent, like, do you think asking bus fees for something that is not being used, like, is it actually correct in this situation when people are not getting 2 square meals a day? We have population of people not getting food. Like, so how is it justified from even school administration or from the education system to even force parents to do that?
Well, Pallavi, I think this is primarily an economic issue and a policy issue. And I'm not an economic or a policy person, but I'll still try to address this as a parent and as somebody who's known about Delhi per se. In Delhi, we are only paying tuition fee. My child goes to a school which belongs to a big group. But still we are only paying tuition fee, and that is it, because we understand that the school has to give salaries and there are mandatory bills that the school has to pay, like taxes and other things, and there might be loans on the school or whatever. Now this is again, a circle. It is a cycle, so to say. uh, I do understand the concerns of the parents that they do not want to pay for the bus, which they should not when the service is not being provided to them. But then there can also be school transport run by small people who run 2 vans or 3 vans, and his whole livelihood is based on those school vans. Now, if parents decide कि हम pay नहीं करेंगे क्योंकि बच्चा तो school नहीं जा रहा, what will that person eat? उसका परिवार कहाँ जाएगा? So again, no issue can be thought about in isolation. For instance, our household helps. They were not providing us services in the last 3 months. But I think it is a moral responsibility for all of us to pay them. Same is for drivers who work for the households or who drive our individual cars. Even if the car is not running, or even if I'm not going anywhere, I think it becomes my moral responsibility to pay the driver. Now, in smaller towns, I do understand, schools will have probably their kind of economic restraints and parents will have their economic restraints. But in this whole conflict, they also have to see about the other dependents of the school. And these are not only direct dependents. Do you realize outside schools, there are so many small vendors who sell kulfi or biscuit or whatever. Imagine wo 4 mahine se school band hai, what is that person doing for a living? So it is again a very inclusive, I think is a social justice issue more than an economic issue as well. And the school and the parents need to sit together and find a middle path that, okay, this is what we can afford, this is what you can afford, and these are our dependents. So let's see how everybody can just survive through this crisis and come to some point of agreement. And I would say that other than the school and the parents, the schools and the parents also have a responsibility towards all the dependents of the school, whether they are, the transport providers or anybody else who's directly whose livelihood is being affected by schools being shut down. Yeah.
I had a question.
Yes,
So
please.
yeah, my internet's not the best, but yeah, I'll just keep my video off and ask a question. It's
Yeah.
regarding when you mentioned about the idea of giving the student an experience, right? So
Yeah.
what are some parts or what are some elements of that experience that you consider when you're designing something? Say if you're designing what your classroom experience should look like, what do you think are some parts that we should look at more consciously at this point of time? From a more keeping them more interested, engaged, but just staying in class at the same time. Maybe not completely being an advocate for edtech, but at the same time, I mean, it's going to be the new normal, as we all like, so to
Yeah.
speak. So, what do you think are some elements of that experience that we could, design better, or just keep in mind when we design better?
Yes. Is of course keeping the human element predominant, I would say, from a psychological point of view, So I see a lot of online classes happening for my child, or sometimes the webinars happening, and there is very little interaction happening. It is like screen, 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 PPT, 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 assignment, question, log out. So there is no human interaction happening. So human interaction should be, I think, primary there. Also, I believe a lot of things that they used to do otherwise can be encouraged in an online setting also. Like from a large group, for instance, Saurabh said that there's a group of 100 students doing it. So maybe for a small activity, for a 10 minutes activity, the 100 students can be divided into 5 groups of 20 each and asked to interact amongst themselves and create something, or make something, or come out with a solution or something like that. Kind of human interaction, community building, knowing each other better, enhances the overall learning process and would probably encourage the educator and the student to come back more refreshed to the class. Similarly, for the teacher also, having the pressure of the clock running, like I can see it's 4:30 already for us, and I was told by Pallavi that we should find out. So I will just quickly say this. So the pressure of the clock running, and then ki mere ko ye 10 slide bhi dikhane inko, and I have to tell them everything that I marked up, and today's lesson has to be concluded today and cannot be postponed for tomorrow. So all that has to be reduced, and we have to understand that teachers, educators are people, they are not robots. So that people element has to be constantly kept in mind. And also language, I should have asked this before. I think हमारे को बहुत कुछ bilingual, multilingual करना चाहिए, because that makes it also more human friendly. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think we all have finished with our questions, or is there anyone who wants to ask a question to Pooja?
Yeah. I'm more than happy to answer. Yeah. Sorry.
Everyone is done with questions, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
You can all follow Pooja in Facebook as well as Instagram. She keeps on giving talks on different mental health issues in both Hindi and English. I have followed her and kept her on top, so I get to know whenever she's speaking, I get notifications. So it was so nice to have you, Pooja. You really addressed all our questions, and then we will definitely reach you in case we have more queries. Thank you so much. And I think a lot of us actually understood the whole thing because your presentation helped us a lot. It was definitely an honor having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I
Thank you.
loved the questions, and I loved meeting all you young, enthusiastic people. And I would love to be in this space more often. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Pooja. Thank you so
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
you.
Jasleen. Thank you. Bye.